Hey everybody, it's Savage Lands News coming in this week with my deck tech on the Rhinar deck I took into my Proquest game this last weekend at Fable Hobby. Got second place, just barely couldn't make it in that final match against an Isylander. A couple of things went wrong, and my opponent played very well, right? So not the best combination of things that happen in the finals, but that's what you expect in the finals, right? A very good player, and if you stumble, you lose, right? So unfortunate, but I think this deck can make it. Let's jump into the list. For one of the first times, I don't know why I haven't done this before, I'll be going over exactly the sideboard guides and my strategies for each hero. And maybe a couple things I'm going to change about this list. And remember, depending on your local meta, you're going to make a lot of different decisions than I do, right? So let's keep that in mind, but let's jump into it right now. Okay, so here's a list. It's going to look very, very, very familiar to what I basically posted last week. Only difference is I made a couple like final last minute decision making steps when I kind of walked in the room. Like I said, I saw way more Kanos than I was comfortable with, like way more. So I made some last minute adjustments. You should always do that. You should always have some cards that come in and out for your local meta. Rhinar is not a meta defining deck. He is a meta disrupting deck, right? So you need to make those changes. Okay, so equipment. Everything's the same. Crown of Providence, Spring Tunic, Gambler's Gloves, Mandible Claws, no Rune, Scab Skin, Skull Horn. No club in this version. And Barkbone is here at the bottom in the sideboard slot. So my default equipment list, I really haven't changed it. I've come close to getting rid of no Rune gloves and always going with Gambler's Gloves or putting in another piece of no Rune somewhere else. But this is what I walked into the tournament with. And then my main deck is always the same. I never change a single card in this main deck in any matchup. It's always identical. I always have 38. That's how I start my plan against every hero. And the reason is because it's all my blues. I run 17. I probably am going to run more in the future. But 17 works against every deck except for like Isylander and Kano. I wish I had more in those matchups. So, I'll see in my next iteration where I'm going to go. And then it has the 15 yellows because they're good. And you need more 6s in your deck. And they help you with blood rushes. And they are the blood rushes, right? They're the best yellows in the game for this kind of style of play because they don't have a discard on them. You'll notice that like reincarnates in here. Did it help me at all? No. It was nice to put the yellow, every once in a while I'd put it back to the bottom and maybe like a super fatiguey Oldhim type matchup that's going to really matter for those Reckless Wings. I know if I had this card at Worlds or San Jose, it would have been much better than the alternative. But in this meta, the games are really fast. So like I didn't get to see the benefit of reincarnate. But it's just, you really only have one other option to put in there. So I like it. Not bad. And then your best reds, right? Swing Big is the best card we have that's not Blood Rush Bellows. Savage Feast is just one of those play enablers, right? It does unique things. It revolves around Scab Skins, and it is worth it to roll every time you see one of these most of the time, right? So it's just why it's there. And even if the one benefit of this card is even if things go wrong and you don't hit the 6 and you don't feel like wasting your Gambler's Gloves there, or the 4, sorry. It replaces your arsenal with itself, right? You keep the pitch. You had this in arsenal, or you had your 3 cards. You get a 6. It discards. It draws you a card. You can put it in your arsenal. Even when things go bad, it's not that bad, right? And then the sideboard. So exactly the same, pretty much identical to the standard list that I had posted before. You'll see the red barragings and the alpha rampage. So basically Oldhim package, control package. Amazing for opening up the game. So on Command and Conquer and Erase Face because I like to pretend that I'm Bravo. My defensive package of Fate Foreseen, 1 Fate Foreseen, 2 Oasis Respites, 3 Sink Belows, 3 Sigils of Solace, 3 That's All You Got, and the Tome of Fjandal, which I kind of classify as a defensive and an offensive card. The unique one you'll notice here is Remembrance. I only put this in the deck because I really wanted to find additional spots. I was really desperate to find enough space for all of my D-Reacts, all of my Sigils, my Arg Smashes, because I figured there's going to be a lot of dash. And as soon as I saw the Kanos, right, like I wanted Oasis Respite. So you can kind of see that I've substituted yellow Barragings for Remembrance. Against Oldhim and those super control-oriented decks, yellow Barragings were really useful. They're still useful against Isylander, so like maybe I missed them a bit in that Isylander game. But it's kind of hard to tell. But basically, I replaced 3 cards with 1. And in the Oldhim, those fatigue-type games, in the Isylander, when, your Blood Rush doesn't do as much damage as you wish it did, you're out of Alpha Rampages because you were just forced to block, you ran out of red Barragings to go with your Alpha Rampage, or do you just want to Blood Rush 6 times against Oldhim? This card is gas. And I kind of changed my playstyle a little bit into Oldhim with this card in my deck, so I'll go into that, and Isylander a little bit actually, but that is the sideboard. So you'll see that we're really tight on spots, right? Like so tight that I had to like get rid of yellow Barragings and try and squish them into 1 card. So let's dive into the matchups right after this. All right, everybody. I went ahead and put every hero in here for the sideboard guide. I will go over my thoughts and my game plan into each hero. I'll spend a little bit more time on the popular ones, a little bit less time on the non-popular ones. But there's 2 things you have to keep in mind. Going first or second, you decide that before you sideboard. If I'm going first, I will always, probably, unless it is a really bad idea, prioritize Alpha Rampage and Barraging Beatdowns in the list no matter what, okay? Sometimes if I'm going second, I'll cut a little bit of the Alpha Rampages out, and if it doesn't fit that matchup very well, think Kano, because, you dump your whole hand and Kano kills you, right? But always looking to do free cheating damage on turn 1 if I can, if I'm forced to go first, if I chose to go first, whatever it is, right? Second, scout your opponents. If you finished your game and you have 25 minutes left and there's still players playing around you, see what they're doing, right? If the Oldhim is running Rainbow Pummels, really useful to know when you play against them. If they're running Frostfangs, super useful to know. If they're playing against another Rhinar and they're not running the Ice Shield, good to know. If they are running the Ice Shield, good to know. If the Dash player is playing into another player, it looks like they're leaning really heavy aggro, right? All of these kind of decision-making things, don't get caught off guard. Try and know what you're playing against. It is super useful if you want to win tournaments, right? And later on, you really only have to scout the tables near you because you're going to play one of them, right? Okay, so let's get into it. Arakni. You're honestly looking to do as much damage as possible while not letting them defend. It's a very defensive deck. Their aim in the Rhinar matchup is not to kill you, it's to fatigue you. You will run out of cards if you do not play this matchup correctly, okay? Alpha Rampages, Barraging Beatdowns, Command and Conquers, super useful, right? A lot of their really dangerous, super scary things like Eradicate can be shut off with a single D-React a lot of the time. Yes, they will probably pump it, but that's what D-Reacts are for. Eradicate is probably unless you're dominating, right? Unless you're just ripping Blood Rush Bellows, they're defending. Eradicates are how you lose the game. It's the only card I fear in the entire game. The rest of the time, I don't really care if they hit me. Sure, banish 1. I'm probably going to kill you anyways. Remembrance helps you in this matchup if they hit your Blood Rushes by some miracle, right? Like they use their helmet and they just manage to nail 2 Blood Rushes or whatever during the game. Keep in mind, you can just never see a Blood Rush in the first cycle because they can see it put in the bottom, right? So always pitch stack. They're going to ruin your pitch stack, but try and get the Alpha Rampages and the Barragings near each other for that second cycle kill. This is a game that probably, if they're really turtley, will go to the second cycle. But if you play really well, if you come out of the gates full aggro, they don't get to mess with your deck at all, right? If you're forcing them to block every single turn with all of their cards, they don't get to disrupt you. So Blood Rushes, roll those dice, Savage Feast, Alpha Rampages, kill them really fast. Pretty easy. I'd say it's one of our easiest matchups in the game, to be honest. Azalea. If you go first, more Alpha Rampages, free damage like we talked about. Azalea players who main Azalea are terrifying. I played one in this last Proquest. It was the closest game. out of all of the games that I won. It was rough. D-Reacts and Arsenal do a huge amount. Outvaluing them, you can, with this build, get them to go to second and third cycle, and they're not really dangerous in the last cycle because they just have so many blues that are at the bottom. Most of them are going to kind of pretend to be fine in the beginning, like, rabbles and go again cards into like a big, scary on-hit arrow. But eventually they run out of the terrifying arrows. If your blood rushes line up really well, you don't really have much to fear in this matchup. But if you stumble at all, or they just hit you with like really insane on hits during your blood rushes, like when you have them in your hand or something in Arsenal, it can be really bad. But yeah, D-Rex and Arsenal, don't get too low. Sigils of Solace do a huge amount of help here. Tell me Fandal. I think the Azalea got me down to like 3 or 4, and I had healed for, 14 health in that game, right? So healing in that matchup did a lot for me. You won't see very many of these decks, but just be prepared. They're actually pretty hard to deal with in this turtle version. If you are the more aggressive Rhinars, you probably have even less to worry about. But, yep. Boltyn, I didn't really play any Boltyns. You'll see some weird things in here. You want to blood rush as fast as possible. You want to kill them as quick as possible so they don't get their combo. So Heart and Cross Trap goes in. Open with your Command and Conquer is really, really useful, especially if you do something like Scab Skin, swing big into Command and Conquer. If you end your blood rush on a Command and Conquer and they blocked already, and your Intimidates already went through, you can rip one of their combo cards out of their arsenal, and there's nothing they can do about it. Pretty huge. And then you'll notice that like D-Reacts are pretty good, and things like Arg Smash are surprisingly useful because they're just non-attacks that block 3. And I had a Boltyn combo me at, I want to say Nats or Worlds, and I took 0 damage or 3 or something like that, right? I just had so much defense in my deck, and I didn't really let them get that many charges to their soul, that when they went to combo, I blocked it with a perfect D-React. I blocked it with a D-React and some armor. I blocked it with 2 non-attacks. I blocked the 2 non-attacks, and then I just threw my equipment suite at him, and I took 3 damage. Rhinar is one of the only decks that can really do that. So, wouldn't say our matchup into them is bad. If they blow you up in turn 3, that's just TCG luck. Sorry, but it is what it is. Bravo. Bravo can be one of the scariest matchups ever, or really not that bad. Depends on how hard they roll and what they draw. D-Reacts are super useful. Oasis Respites are super useful. You could go up to 2 here. It turns off Dominate. You can block from your hand with an Oasis. Turns off a Crippling Crush really, really easily. Maximize your blood rushes. Hit your Alpha Rampages pretty good. You'll win this matchup. If they just, repeatedly dominate, on hit, survive the storm until they break, and then go for it, right? Bravo's on the rise right now, but they're so catered to beating the aggro decks that we are kind of uniquely well positioned because a lot of their cards don't do anything to us. Like Crush the Weak is useless, right? A lot of their on hits don't matter. So, if they're threatening a big on hit but it doesn't matter to you, take the damage and do more, right? That's how you win this matchup. Okay. Briar is an interesting one. I'm super in on Heart and Cross Trap right now into Briar. The games don't go long enough for me to really benefit from Tunic a lot of the time. In the Briar matchup, I am looking to do as much damage because they typically won't block that much. Do as much damage as I can while preventing as much damage as I can so I can eat one nice turn and Blood Rush. It's kind of like Fi, where my game plan is to stop the really dangerous things from hitting me, like a snatch at the end of the combat. I'll do whatever I can to not let them get a free card. And then hit them for 6, hit them for 7, hit them for 8, right? If you think about a 20 damage Blood Rush and 2 swing bigs, the next attack you play, they have to block, right? So that adds up quickly. 3 6s in an average Blood Rush, they're in block territory, right? As soon as you get these defensive decks or these aggressive decks to block, as soon as you stop Briar from getting an embodiment, the deck doesn't block or do anything anymore. So preventing the embodiment on turns you're ready to pivot is actually really, really important. And I know it can be kind of hard to pivot and stop the embodiments sometimes, but if you can manage to do that, if you get them on like this loop of not getting embodiments, when you go for the big damage, they just eat it all. And there's nothing they can do about it. Things can go wrong, obviously. The one Briar I played, I did lose to. They had a really explosive turn that I wasn't prepared for outside of like a Channel Mount Heroic turn. And then I went for like a greed play. But honestly, had things gone even slightly differently, I have right now a pretty positive win rate into Briar. With this list specifically, with this sideboard guy, specific. I just heal so much and have so many D-Reacts and have, CNCs on their big turns a lot of the time that you can just get them into block, right? That's really the secret. Get them to block, they lose, If you, if you don't have enough health left to Blood Rush, you've lost the matchup. Dash. I really like this matchup right now. It's weird. I basically play like I'm Bravo, right? Six on-hit cards here. These two cards really, really ruin Dash's game plan. You can pivot between fatigue and aggression just as easily as they can pivot between the two, right? So, you can wait out the pounders. They only last 3 turns. And then, Heart and Cross Trap in this matchup seems to be like an all-star, right? I've had turns where, they threaten something enormous. I block 12. I break my Cross Trap, and I throw an Erase Face at them. That's a huge amount of value, right? I've done something like, Sink Below from Arsenal, Sink Below from hand, Fate Foreseen from hand, and then on my turn, swing big, which is 20 points of swing, right? 12 defense, 8 attack. Stuff like that really like ruins their math. Never let Incombustible Courier hit ever. Ever. Don't ever let it hit. That's how you lose. And as soon as they, if you're not able to go aggressive because they're just hitting the nuts and they're banishing the blues and everything seems to be going wrong, as soon as they realize you're fatiguing them and they pivot and they start stacking up for a maximum velocity turn, they start stacking up for something big, that's when you switch gears, hit them with the CNC, hit them with the Erase Face over and over and over again until they run out of cards, right? Sigils and Tome of Fyendal are huge in this matchup. It just buys me a lot of time. The more Blood Rushes I see, the better. The more Erase Faces they see, the better. The dash I played in my Proquest, I ended every single Blood Rush, all 3 of them, with a CNC and an Erase Face. And every single one of them did something. And it felt like it was basically just, I was untouchable, right? So that's how I play in the dash. Arc Smash is super useful. Always try and get 2 items if you can. But, if it shows up, take what you can get, right? I played Dori. Dori is really a matchup where you just have to understand what Dori does. You have to understand her cards. Obviously, the 2 Oasises and the 4 D-Reacts meant that I could basically never let them get a counter. The way I play it is I don't let them get a counter because all you have to do is memorize her cards, right? Sometimes you'll get caught off guard, but if you get caught off guard, that's when you just double down. But stop a counter, attack a little bit. Stop a counter, attack a little bit. Draw a Blood Rush, have a already prepped card in Arsenal. Let them get a counter, Blood Rush for 18. They have to make the decision. Wow, am I going to keep all 4 of my cards and try and get more counters and take 18 damage, or am I going to block and probably not be able to get a counter? They often choose to block because if you're playing this way, 20 damage is enough to get them already into lethal range, right? So you just kind of loop this over and over and over again until you win. Understanding her cards is the big thing here, and then always, having the game plan between like putting some, either if you're trying to stop a counter, you put in a D-Rack in Arsenal. And if you're trying to go for a Blood Rush, you're putting an attack in Arsenal. And you just kind of loop between those 2 things. Dromai is pretty easy nowadays, especially since I moved to Heart and Cross Trap, right? Hardened Crossshot basically allows me to have a perfect Blood Rush even while sending a 6 to stop a dragon, right? And we just have so many penetration cards that's hard for them to block us. So, you know, you pop a dragon, you swing value, you pop a dragon, you swing value. On a Blood Rush turn, if they don't have that many dragons on the table, you let them hit you, and then you Blood Rush for 20, 18, whatever it is. You keep your Hardened Crossshot if you can. If you needed to use it, you use it, and then you just loop this 3 times until you win the game, right? And, you know, typically like an Alpha Rampage somewhere in there to make them leak damage. You can lose this matchup 110%, but since I added Hardened Crossshot, it has gotten a lot easier, and I have a pretty strict game plan of, you know, kill them in the first cycle. Fi. Man, I'm still undefeated against Fi's in major tournaments with this list. And I think what it really revolves around is, I mean, Hardened Crossshot made it a lot easier because it's kind of the same thing I was saying with Briar, where Fi will never ever block you. I mean, I've had a couple, you know, and if they're blocking you, that's pretty good for you, right? Like they're trading way less value. They typically get more value from attacking than defending. But if you break the math down, 18 to 20 damage Blood Rush and 2 7s or 2 6s puts them basically in blocking range, right? And they can't block. So if you send 3 6s while defending, and then you find 1 Blood Rush, you've gotten them to the point where they have to block you, or they die. And you have things like, you know, Reckless Swing and all that kind of stuff that also stall out the game. So really what I do is I just don't let them hit me with the most beneficial cards, right? I'm going to assume if they're on Mask of Momentum, you know, don't let them draw the card. That is your whole game plan for the entire game. You know, you don't have that unpredictable turn like you do with Pouncing Lynx. You know what's going to happen. They're going to, if they open with an Art of War, your plan immediately changes to not letting them take advantage of that Art of War. And then if they're on Pouncing Lynx, right, their attack patterns are, you know, it's harder to predict because they're going to have this 30 damage turn sometimes. But what is predictable with Fi is their arsenal. A lot of the time, you know, it's a Phoenix Flame. Okay, so it's super predictable. But a lot of the time, if Fi doesn't hit you with all of their cards, like especially if they ended with, you know, their last turn with no arsenal and then they keep 1 card, right, and they put that in their pocket, it's only a couple things. It either means they had 2 attacks that don't have go again, and they didn't feel like popping their boots on that turn, or they didn't have their boots, or it's an Art of War, or it's a card they couldn't afford, which typically is like a CNC or something, right? So playing around their arsenal is really important, right? CNC in this matchup is like the all-star. If I ever have a blue and like 3 cards, like a erase phase, or sorry, a CNC and like, and, you know, any other 2 cost 6, I'm rolling the dice and I'm trying to end on a CNC, like, you know, or swing big, CNC. That is an amazing turn. It often really messes them up. Don't let them get free value from Snatch. Don't let it hit if it's at the end of the combat chain. I will always use my equipment for that card or one of the on-hit cards that they open their chains with. And then have enough life to Blood Rush 1 time. It's the whole goal, right? Hit them as cleanly as you can, Blood Rush once, play the blocking game, win the blocking game. Isylander. You know, maybe I really shouldn't give anybody here advice on Isylander. It's my worst matchup in the game. I don't know what it is. I know we're supposed to be favored into it. I really don't believe it's true, especially not with the list that I run. In all of my tournaments, Isylander is the deck who's beaten me, basically, right? I think I've lost to 1 or 2 other decks, and then every other deck I've lost to is Isylander. It's pretty crazy. I'm going to work on this matchup so much. This is my target. If I can figure this matchup out, I will feel so confident on Rhinar going forward. I have like a 50-50 into them, and it's either I overwhelmingly beat them because everything went my way, or I overwhelmingly get stuck in a hole because they just found the things that they needed on my Blood Rush turns and on every one of my turns ever, right? And I'm not really sure how to fix that just yet. You know, I had some new ideas where I was going to run Remembrance and just throw Blood Rushes at them because, you know, even if they manage to find the hypo or find the whatever on my Blood Rush turn, I can just pull them back. In my game I played yesterday, it was a really tight game. I got him down to 4. We played that final turn. I think I could stall it. I could stall it out a little bit longer, but things just went wrong, right? Like I discarded a Beast Within on turn 2. I lost a Blood Rush and Oasis Respite. And another thing, I took 3 damage, lost a Blood Rush. My first Blood Rush I played got Bleak Expansed, and it was the only copy that the Isylander had in their deck. So things didn't go well, and it still was pretty close. But this is how it always goes. I either dominate and win in a couple turns, or I get destroyed. Or, you know, I just get slowly bled into the floor. So this is the matchup I'm going to work the most on. If I make any changes to this list, it's because of Isylander. So I'll let you guys know if I find anything. Kano. Oasis Respite. Put it in your pocket, and when they combo, you stop it. Everything else about us into Kano is typically favored for us. The only thing that really hurts us is, like, you know, you play your Alpha Rampage, you discarded all your cards, or you played your Blood Rush, you discard your card, you don't get the draw until they respond. So a lot of the time, our most beneficial cards, they get this huge kill window to react before we get our benefits. Oasis kills that. Straight. Done. Don't worry about it. Then it's just a game of, like, kill them fast enough before they can, like, chip you down with, like, you know, their 6s and stuff, or their 5s and their 6s. Oasis is like a king in this matchup. If you don't have Oasis, you got to go super fast. Don't be afraid to roll. You're going to need to kill them as fast as you possibly can. Arc Smash sometimes comes in super handy. Like, I've killed a couple of Deja Vus and Epots before. And then other times when you're the oppressor in the matchup, they're just not getting to play their items. So it can be disappointing. Lexi's a super hard one. There's 2 versions of Lexi floating around. There's like this super tall Dominate version, which I think we have an auto loss into. The problem with that deck is, like, it defeats itself, right? Sometimes it just doesn't work. If it doesn't work, then you win. But honestly, it seems like a Rhinar counter, which is crazy to say. But, like, when it slips up, like, we just don't present enough damage to, like, threaten it. So it just gets to take its time and find it again. And then when it's working, like, we can't do anything, you know. Epots are probably really big in this matchup. Normal Lexi, I think the community is pretty split on Lexi right now. She's either, like, the most oppressive deck ever to be in existence, or she's, like, not. She loses to too many decks to be good. You used to be able to be, like, just stall until they messed up and win the game, right? Like, just defend, turtle. They'll run out of arrows, they'll run out of threats. A lot of the new Lexi lists are kind of seeming to be way too consistent now. So you don't just get to wait it out. So you need to find the balance of killing them and defending and surviving. So I didn't play any this weekend. I don't play that many Lexis in general. So, you know, I'm going off the old lists. I have heard that the new lists are way more terrifying. So this is probably something I have to work on as well. Oldhim. Nail your Blood Rushes. Penetrate defense with Alpha Rampage and barraging beatdowns. My new tech is Remembrance, which has allowed me to play an entirely different game than I used to. I used to run 0 D-Reacts in the Oldhim, and I used to just kind of kill him. But with Remembrance being added because of the changes I made, I feel way more consistent into them. Now I'm just throwing attacks every single turn. I'm just throwing D-Reacts at the damage. I'm healing a shitload from, like, Sink Below and Tum of Fjendal. I feel very safe with this list into Oldhim. It's crazy. Way safe, like, incredibly safe. So in my last game, you know, I had 6 Blood Rushes. It doesn't matter if I get shielded twice and I get ice reacted. Does not matter. I'm gonna kill them with 6 Blood Rushes. I also never felt like I ran out of threats because I knew that there was a Remembrance cycling. I could go get my Alpha Rampages and a Barraging Beatdown and pitch stack for the end. I knew I could pull up 6s for my reckless swings, right? I never felt like I was going to run out of sixes. This list seems incredibly strong in Oldhim, both the aggressive and the turtle version. I'm happy with the Oldhim matchup right now. Much more happy than I was with the last list. Viserai still sucks. I don't know what to tell you. This is you can. So I wrote this here. The only list were main changes. You can think about getting rid of Savage Feast if you don't feel like rolling without Gambler's Gloves, and you can just put in any one of the other attacks. In this matchup, you're really looking to high roll. Sigils have bought me an incredible amount of health in this matchup, enough to stall the game out just long enough to kill them, because like you can't really block a Rosetta Thorn, and a lot of the time you can't really block a massive rune chant turn. And a sigil is just like a card that blocks 3 on the turns that you couldn't have blocked 3. And I know like a lot of people want to be proactive instead of reactive, but in this matchup, like if I can find 2 blood rushes, I win. So it's just about like how long can I win? How long can I survive until I find the blood rushes? So that's where like the sigils come in. That all you got's just prevent 2 damage and let me draw a card. It's like that 2 damage never happened. The sigils can kind of replace the Rosetta Thorn and the rune chants. The erase faces buy me an entire turn. Command and Conquer buys me 5 health sometimes. And then Hardened Crossshot makes sure your first Blood Rush just goes through unchecked, right? Nothing can go wrong. You can block with a card, you do whatever you needed to do, and still fire Blood Rush. This is probably the closest I've gotten to consistency against Viserai. But still, like the only Viserai I played, I ended up winning with a Reckless Swing by drawing it off the top. I would have died if I didn't, right? So things don't always go well. So that's the matchup guide. General ideas. You can go to the link. I'll put it in the description below. You can can just run this on Talishar. Right now, you'll see that I have like a 65% win rate. I think I posted this list, so it probably changed a little bit. But yeah, and you'll see that the win rates right now, although not very many, I understand. On Talishar, I understand. But the win rates against Fi and Briar are positive. And in real life tournament settings, positive. Positive win rate against all of the aggro decks. The only one that I struggle into is Viserai, which I don't have a positive win rate into. I think I'm literally 50-50 on Viserai. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.